Well, hi, everyone. This is Daniel Williams, Senior Editor at MGMA and host of the MGMA Podcast Network. We are back with another Business Solutions podcast. Today, we've got John Poli, Industry Principal for Healthcare at RingCentral. John has held senior leadership positions in healthcare for over 20 years and has leveraged innovative technology to change business models, drive digital transformation, and develop IT and business strategy. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Daniel. Good to be here with you.
Yeah, you and I had an opportunity to work together on a webinar not too long ago. That was a lot of fun to connect with you there. You and I were connecting offline. You have been traveling quite a bit lately. The journey that you took that got my interest, though, was to Italy. Tell us about that. What happened in Italy? What were you doing over there?
Well, we had always planned to go, my wife and I, and we did a tour which was called the Taste of Italy. So mainly it was a quick visit to the northern cities in northern Italy, so Milan, Venice, Florence, and Rome primarily. We also stopped in little towns, Siena, Veneto, Varese, and it just was the entire spectrum of the Sistine Chapel to the small village and having lunch in a small cafe. It's kind of that great combination of experiences, beautiful landscapes, beautiful cities, architecture, art, and history coming together. For me, as a buff, just enormous potential. I could have spent 2 years there, but 2 weeks was certainly a taste, and we will certainly be going back, but it was lovely.
Yeah, and I know you work a lot. I think you mentioned offline that you're able to set the computer aside. So were you able to just purely enjoy this as a vacation?
Yeah, it was fantastic. I was, one of the things I wrote an essay to business school actually that said the only way to really relax is to focus your mind completely on something else. So I think I said I'd study music if I needed to just take time off from work. But this was perfect because you had so much history to study, so much background, and so much stuff to see that your mind was just overwhelmed with just capturing it all. Whether it was, the history of Michelangelo and what he did from, with David and La Pietà to the Sistine Chapel to the architectural dynamics of Il Duomo. It's just amazing stuff. I've read books on it and seeing it for the first time. I mean, my screensaver is the School of Athens, and then I saw Raphael's School of Athens. It was pretty crazy type of thing to be there in person and see the actual, in the Vatican Museum. So it was just beautiful. It was beautiful.
That's incredible. Now, I did pick up your accent in pronouncing these places is far beyond what mine is. So do you have a background in Italian, or what's going on there?
Ironically, I did study Italian in high school, and I actually placed out of it in college because I did it for 6 years. So I was relatively fluent at that time, but then I just never used it. Some of my wife's extended family were Italian, okay, but ironically, some of those dialects were so sharp that we hardly understood each other. But I just haven't had time to practice it, and now so many years later, it was good to study it. I did some no plug here, but I did some Babbel activity to get myself sharp, and I was conversational for the most part at times. But when they started rattling things off, it was a challenge.
That is wonderful. I just love that you got that experience and got to share that with your wife. So that's really cool. Yeah, so let's turn the page to your background now. As we mentioned in the introduction, you've got about 20 years of this healthcare experience. Talk about that. What are some highlights leading up to your role now at RingCentral that you'd like to share with the MGMA audience?
Well, fundamentally, about I'd say the 2004 or 5 timeframe, I was strategic about looking at industries. I'd always been interested in communications as a tool to transform industries. And I looked across the spectrum of some industries that I thought would really be interesting to take it up to the application layer and deliver changes in operational models. And healthcare was clearly one which was ripe for that transformation. Ironically, 15, 20 years later, it is still in process, as we know. We can see the early kind of signs of it changing drastically, but it was just very interesting to me to see how we could basically think about healthcare in a new way and what communications and infrastructure tools could bring to the table. So I started off as the CIO at Delta Dental, which out of Washington State, one of the most progressive of the Deltas. We were part of a technology leadership team that was looking a lot at the interplay between oral health and medical health and seeing how those interactions took place. I did a lot of data and analytics work in that space as well as the CIO and spent 5 years there. Moved to New York and was building tools as a CEO of a small startup, PNR Dental, that was transitioning to a technology company from a services company. We spent some time on that and then moved. My big position was rolling into Gartner as an executive partner in Manhattan, working with clients in the Northeast on digital transformation. It really was a broad spectrum, almost like a post-grad degree on all the technologies, all the issues going around. And what were the things that were changing, that were driving healthcare? About half my portfolio was payers, providers, life sciences. So looking at what was the impact that was having, obviously data and analytics was enormous on that. Cloud services was enormous on that. Communications tools were just on the cusp of that, but in many cases weren't part of that revolution. But as we evolved into the 2000s, as COVID hit, as other things happened, that evolution started to accelerate in communications tools. And the cloud for communications became really a target at a very interesting point for me. RingCentral was building verticals to target industries, financial services, government, education, and healthcare. And I got the opportunity to take on the leadership and the industry principal role for healthcare. So looking at the power of what RingCentral had to bring to the table in the industry and in the communications sector, I felt that was a very powerful kind of catalyst opportunity for us in that space. And then looking at macro trends with where healthcare was heading, I thought this is a very interesting model to get part of. So it's been exciting to be part of it today.
Yeah. So at RingCentral, as that industry principal, what do you see as your role there?
Well, it's somewhat multifaceted. I'm in the sales, formerly I'm in the sales organization. It's primarily what's called an enablement role. So my goal is to help the sales organization to sell and promote the healthcare strategy for our clients, right? What are the targets? What are the workflows? What are the services we offer that best fit the needs of the healthcare industry? Identifying them clearly, articulating how they go to market, and then working with potential partners to create more enhanced workflow solutions with our integration strategy. So first part is meeting with clients, listening to them, understanding the challenges, being that voice of the customer back, being a central point for all the sales team to come to for a clear, defined strategy and how we go to market, and then working with the industry to see where the evolution is happening in terms of integrations, because that's one of our strengths. How do we find a partnership, an ecosystem partnership that makes sense to solve further problems in the healthcare vertical? And that's where our investments are happening in the vertical itself.
Yeah. So you and I did partner together recently on an MGMA webinar, MGMA and RingCentral. You presented on something really interesting, the use of AI in call centers. Talk about that. What's the integration? Where are we in the life cycle of utilizing AI in those call centers?
Well, one of the things we would talk about, particularly in my history, when we started thinking about artificial intelligence as a productivity tool, was doing it within, one of the best recommendations I made when I was at Gartner was let the application vendors bring AI to you, because they'll be embedding it into the actual applications. And that's exactly what we're seeing today as this thing has now exploded. Obviously, ChatGPT and generic NLU and LLM, large language models, are out there, but where businesses are going to really gain value is the structural integration of AI into service applications, contain data structures so you don't have kind of risks associated with that open air model that you'd worry about, and also a focused presentation of that AI on functions that are valuable to a certain environment, a technology environment. So in our case, communication. So when we talk about RingCentral's AI launches this year, RingSense, we also have RingSense for RingCX, our contact center tool, as you mentioned. So whether it's our unified communications platform universally, or it's our contact center, in both cases, we are embedding AI into that call management structure so that the point of experience, whether it's a patient in healthcare, whether it's consumer or otherwise, or whether it's doctor-to-doctor, peer-to-peer type relationships, we're giving the ability to manage that call and operate that call and optimize that call, not only as a real-time environment, well, both a planning environment, a real-time environment, and a follow-up or post-analysis environment. And that's really where our technology comes into play. So it might be, for example, feeding information to an analyst or to a call center environment ahead of time on an inbound call, so that call center rep is prepared for that discussion. It might be real-time monitoring of that call while it's happening for sentiment analysis, if it's going wrong, going well, and then finally the follow-up to that, recording and analyzing that call, making next step recommendations, which you can imagine, particularly in peer-to-peer. Say you're talking in your car, say you're talking on the road. You don't have to worry about taking notes or trying to file things down, right? We're doing that for you. Part of the AI is to manage that for you as a productivity tool. And that's where you find the real power of it, is that it gives an organization an ability, particularly in healthcare where it hasn't been there to date, the ability to capture the key information that's occurring in the multitude of interactions happening that traditionally were just transactions that were only kept in someone's memory. Now we have an actual transcript analysis of it. And as needed, can be used as long-term data structures and information for optimizing performance, productivity, cost management, whatever it may be.
Yeah. So in those contact centers, where's the AI start and where does the human start? Are they integrated, or is the patient or whoever that consumer is calling in and talking to an AI? Are they talking to a human? How does that work?
Well, it's a great question, and there are obviously flavors to all of that, right? So one of the things we're seeing, let's take the first one, which I think most people think about, is robots, right?
Yeah.
is someone replacing a human. We are looking at conversational AI as a very powerful tool, because if in fact you can take a vast majority of, I would call, the more simple questions that are asked via phone call to a live agent, in many cases that can be handled with a dynamic, what we call a digital experience, right? Through either a chatbot, through some, and as conversational AI gets better at understanding the question, finding the answers to that question, distributing that question, and then being conversational in tone, so that user might not even know at times that they are talking to a person, but they're getting the information they need. They're being listened to by the organization. That digital experience is a big part of what we're looking at as a transformational model to help optimize costs and allow the live agents to handle the more complex and serious issues that patients may have on the phone with them. So that's the first stage. When you actually have, obviously we always support, live calls is the largest part, it always will be for now, as part of the experience between patients and their providers and their practices. So a large part of it is augmentation, is things I spoke to earlier, which is the agents online, they're getting prompts on recommendations. For example, potentially the history of the patient will inform and prompt that agent to say, oh, by the way, if you have a certain profile of disease or age, maybe, we would recommend a checkup, or we would recommend maybe a screening, or we'd recommend X, Y, or Z. So you're giving informed contextual discussions with the patient. You're dealing with, as I said, real time, maybe the sentiment analysis of that patient. So you're already augmenting that agent's ability to help exercise the first call resolution for that patient, and that's what people want. They want to get an answer, and they want to know that their doctor or their practice is listening to them. And so we want to build those tools to allow that to happen. And then collectively at the back end, in our what we call our conversational intelligence, we capture this aggregate of activity and say, okay, now what's happening out there? We've had 2,000 calls this week. What happened? Right? You can now start to see trends, recommendations, analysis, and a learning opportunity through AI that's really unique. And so that's pretty powerful. So we're looking at all aspects of it, the different tools being integrated, but obviously we are focusing on the optimization of that interaction with the patient, because that's what we manage in our call centers and in our clinics and our UC services.
I know. John, when I'm hearing you talk, I wish I had had that AI with me, giving me prompts when I was taking tests in school. That would have been so helpful. Hey, maybe you should consider putting this down. So I did want to ask you then, because this question came up in the webinar as well, and I did want to let everybody know that the webinar is based on an ebook that Ring Central has recently published. We're going to provide a direct link to that. The title of it, I want to get this right, Using AI to Power a Cutting-Edge Customer Experience in Your Contact Center. So that's the ebook, and that's a basis of how you built out the webinar, and it's what we're talking about here. One of the questions that came up was, where are we in the timeline? Are we crawling yet? Are we walking yet with this utilization of AI? Are we still in the womb, so to speak? Where are we if you think about this life cycle of AI right now?
I think we're crawling. I mean, to be blunt, I mean,
Yeah.
I thought, I think we've had this technology for a number of years now in terms of how it's been employed.
Mhm.
I think what we're seeing though is I'm seeing it in just my interaction with hundreds of clients every year. Um, when I first came into the industry, as from a communications, from a vendor standpoint, being a representing Ring, it was people were very hesitant to talk about collecting a video conference as a data point or collecting a call or recording anything with patients. It was a situation where I just didn't where you go. Everything was driven by the memory of the professionals, which is fine, into the health record, and that was a very limited set of structures. A lot of it was that's how the tools worked, so the workflow worked that way. And B, a lot of it was risk mitigation. That litigation discovery were very issues that we're very cautious about, and that's still prevalent today in many cases. But I do think, as I think we mentioned, I think two trends opened the kimono a bit. One was when we went to a virtual health environment through COVID, it changed the dynamic where so much of the interactions were remote that you wanted to capture, you wanted to have that information because that was with your patients every day. That more and more people start to understand that, hey, the structural recording that's occurring with this patient is important, and we need to capture and understand what's happening there, make sure that we understand the nuances, and then maybe we can change it to something as an asset like translation or using it to get to people who maybe we don't speak the same language. The second level was, I think, that the AI revolution is that once it became apparent that you could really critically and quickly manage content and understand content and react to it both real time as well as in a post activity environment, both of those kind of open up the kimono to what we could possibly do in healthcare. And again, when I say we're in the crawl stage, we really are. I mean, you think about just collaboration teams around healthcare today. I have 3 elderly parents, all in assisted living. I mean, 3, my mom and dad and my aunt, I'm power of attorney for. Managing their care coordination for them is very challenging still today. Even though all these tools are out there, there's a ton of collaboration tools, but there still isn't a central way to get to that. And I think that is the future, though. I think care teams that are virtual, care teams that go to the home, that go wherever that patient goes, that stay connected, that give information to the patient's family as well as to the professional community on that given patient centrally, are still, I think, big opportunities for value and care coordination that are out there today. And I think that's going to happen. I think AI is going to feed a lot of that in many ways, and I think it's going to accelerate that. But we're in the very early stages of understanding how do we get from here to there.
Yeah. So you mentioned something really early, really important earlier. You talked about the data analysis, that you're seeing trends through the use of AI and the other technology. Talk about that. What are some trends that have emerged for y'all that you've seen in that contact center where you can help both your employees as well as the customers that they're talking to?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously the construct of knowledge management, of being able to understand, okay, we had 20% of our calls this month on X. Do we have a clear piece of content that responds to X so that when I get a call on that, I can feed either the analyst or the patient directly that information? Well, you can have this knowledge management now that's very dynamic, right? So as soon as calls are coming in, activity's happening, we're hearing what's needed, boom, real time, you're searching the web to find the best content to answer these questions. And you have this incredible library you can build in very short order that tunes itself to the needs of the consumer base or the patient base calling in on the one side. So that's really interesting. As I said, as we look at the real-time interactions, it's being able to the capturing the data and the emotional or the identity of what's going on in a conversation. I've had, for example, at EC Connect this year, a number of vendors come up to me and say, we have tools that within 90 seconds of a conversation can give you psychological profiles of the patient, right? Which is fascinating to think about. Now, again, I'm not saying that's there or not there, and I'm not vouching for that technology, but this is the start of where it gets to be going, is that you can start to see how much of the communication activity becomes material to patient care, to patient understanding, and to patient activity. And having as I said, the analytics infrastructure to capture that, understand that, is a big part of the partnership that has to go with kind of the new tools that are out there. I think a lot of companies aren't prepared for that amount of new data coming in, how to even structure and manage that over time. And so that's where, good AI companies are good data management companies. And so good AI users are going to be good data management companies too.
Yeah. I have a last question for you then. This one is very important. You touched on it earlier, but it's that protection of the patient, and their data and their information. Mm-hmm. So this is being recorded. This is being, captured here. How do we continue to protect those patients? You talked about your parents, your aunt earlier, and that collaborative effort there, but how do we protect them as well?
Well, one of the things we try to do is obviously with all our tools and services across our UC and our CX, CSC spectrum, that's contact center, our contact center direct, and our unified communications tool sets, and that's voice, video, messaging, all that. It's all HIPAA compliant and high trust, right? There's certain parameters of security, storage, encryption that are dictated by that by design. We sign BAAs with our clients as well to assure that we're supporting all of the procedural environments around protection of privacy data. But it does get very challenging. We're looking all the time. We've got a compliance officer. We've got privacy statements we put out to make sure that people understand how we are thinking through this process very formally, because you do need to protect that. That is the one unknown, right? We've seen recently, for example, in the healthcare world, there's been a number of hacks, right? It's becoming a target, particularly intermediaries. So we're very conscious of that technology and security issues. So as we look to build our future services, particularly in something as broad as AI, keeping an understanding of where and how we train those language models, what data we're using, and how we use that with our clients is key. And I think if you take that approach structurally, if you take the same, I'd say, borders you put on your data that you collect today. We've been recording, for example, conversations for years now. Yeah. That's not a new thing for Ring. So ever since our digital environment came out, those capabilities were there. So we're taking the very same approach we did to keep that secure all these years, and we've been very fortunate. We're going to continue to do that with AI development as well.
Okay. Well, John Poli, Industry Principal of Healthcare at Ring Central, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Great to be with you, Daniel.
Yeah. Well, that is going to do it for this episode of Business Solutions. As John and I were talking, we're going to provide you links to the ebook, to the webinar on demand, where you can also get continuing ed credits. And we're going to be here on the podcast. We'll provide links here as well that can drive you directly back to Ring Central and some of the cool things that they're doing there. And for now, I want to thank all of you for being MGMA podcast listeners.